Welcome to another edition of Green is Good, and we're so honored to have with us today Doug Kramer. He's the president of Kramer Metals. Welcome to Green is Good, Doug.
Pleasure.
You know, before we get talking about Kramer Metals, your company, can you talk a little bit about Doug Kramer, the journey leading up to Kramer Metals and how you got involved, etc.?
Sure. My family's company was started in 1937 by my grandfather.
Wow.
And it was always something that I loved and I enjoyed. It was a necessity, I think, more for my dad and my uncle to support the family. And growing up, you know, I loved it. And I think I loved being with my dad more than I loved the business necessarily.
Yeah.
So any excuse to be with my dad.
That's awesome. So your grandpa started it?
Yep.
Your dad and your uncle ran it. Now,
right.
Your generation, who's in the business now in your generation?
Now it's my brother and I and my dad.
And your dad's still there?
He's there every day.
And you still love being with him?
Every day.
That's awesome. You know, we're going to talk a little bit about Kramer Metals. And for our listeners and viewers out there, to learn more about Doug's company, you could go to kramermetals.com, Kramer metals.com. Talk a little bit about the business of owning and running a scrapyard. You know, our generation grew up thinking of scrapyards more like Sanford & Son. It's not Sanford & Son, obviously. Give a modern-day version of what a scrapyard and a recycling scrapyard looks like.
Well, it is not substantially different in terms of people bringing in obsolete goods into your facility for recycling. Modern-day scrapyards also obviously purchase prompt scrap. It's industrial scrap that's coming from manufacturers. It's material that's coming from machine shops and aerospace and defense and all different manners of production. The difference today is that in addition to being a highly regulated industry, we are extremely careful about what we allow in, the types of materials, the hazardous constituents of which we absolutely will not let into our facilities. Safety, health, all the things that go into running a modern scrap facility, and obviously having a very strict inbound materials guideline so that you're not bringing in materials that are going to be a problem.
It's a lot different than when your grandpa started it, let's just say that.
A lot different.
What state do you operate in? Does Kramer Metals operate in?
We operate in California.
You're in California. So your scrap yards, what kind of materials do you bring in, given the regulations and the laws and the rules that we have to adhere to in California?
Right, so we have two yards.
Okay.
One of them is a ferrous operation, so it's buying all grades of iron, steel, cast iron scrap.
Okay.
And our other yard is our non-ferrous facility, where we buy all grades of aluminum, brass, copper, stainless steel, and high-temperature alloys.
Gotcha. And, you know, do you put them in shredders? Do you just sort them? How do you handle them once they're on your property?
We have a variety of different mechanical operations that we have. We do shred, we shear, we bale, we briquette, we torch, we plasma cut. The only two things that we don't do to metal to prepare them for their final destination is surface conditioning or shot blasting.
Gotcha.
So other than that, we do it all.
Given that you grew up in the business and your grandfather started it, it's a different world economy now from the time your grandfather ran the business with your dad. Now that you and your brother and your dad are there, how does the world economic platform affect what's going on at Kramer Metals now, given the price of oil, steel, gold, silver, and all the commodities which are trading in unprecedented times here in April 2015? What kind of outlook does that give you, and how do you then encourage new products or get into new lines of business to hedge against economic factors that we've all never seen before?
It's a good question. I don't know that I necessarily have a good answer for you. It's something that we struggle with every day.
Yeah.
My brother and I have recently gotten more into plastics.
Okay.
Some of our customers have demanded kind of single stream recycling efforts, and they don't want to go to 2 or 3 different companies, so we've taken on plastics in that regard. So that's one way
Gotcha.
of dealing with that. There are factors that are beyond our control, and so we don't try to control things we can't control. We work very hard to have an efficient operation. We work very hard at the relationship that we have with our employees and making sure that our employees buy into our vision of how we want the business to run and the efficiencies. And we do the best that we can do.
That's in your control.
That's within our control. Right?
Gotcha. What at Kramer Metals? What kind of customers are coming in? Is it industrial customers? Is it the man or woman off the street? What does your customer mix look like?
We do have some public business,
Okay.
The man and woman off the street type of thing, but we are primarily an industrial company. We primarily service industry.
Gotcha. And what does the life of a day in the life of your employee look like? How many employees do you have, and what does their work schedule look like?
So we're about 30 employees now. We're
Okay.
down considerably from where we were. Generally, our drivers will get in anytime between 6:30 and 7 in the morning. Trucks are out the door by 7 on their stops. The facility employees are in by 8. They have an 8 to 4:30 day. Trucks are a 7 to 3:30, 4, maybe 4:30, depending upon how busy we are. They're
6 days a week,
There's
7 days
6
a week?
days. We were doing 6 days a week.
Yeah.
With the conditions that prevail right now,
Yeah.
we cut out Saturdays.
Gotcha.
Unless we need to be there.
Gotcha.
But otherwise, Saturday was actually our large public day. That was the day we were really open primarily for the public.
Gotcha. With technology can be both a friend and a foe. How is technology a friend to your company in terms of to Kramer Metals? In terms of how does it allow you to reduce labor costs and actually be more efficient in terms of how you process your materials?
Well, certainly what you're seeing on this floor today is a good example of what the efficiencies are of good technology. This equipment is incredibly efficient. It's efficient not only in terms of the speed with which it processes scrap, but also in terms of the energy that it consumes. So obviously, by using mechanical means of preparing material, and the more mechanical processing we can do, the faster and more efficiently we can handle and process our scrap. But it takes people to do what we do. So to think that we can't do it without having good employees who can manage that flow and understand what they're putting into those machines, who can identify upgrades and downgrades, that's kidding yourself. So we rely upon the technology on the machinery side. We rely upon technology in terms of information management. Obviously, the more information we can get, the better. The more of the right information we can get, the better, I should really say, because it's just, there's more information than you can handle anyways. But
speaking of right information, we talked a little bit about, a couple minutes ago, we mentioned the headwinds that come from the globalization of the industry and things that are out of your control and your colleagues' control and the industry's control in terms of the prices of oil, the price of energy, and the steel right now. How is that, though, the globalization, a friend of Kramer Metals in terms of giving you more opportunity to sell? And since there's emerging economies in China and India, and even though maybe they're taking a little dip and rest right now, they're sure to come back at some point. How is that a friend to Kramer Metals for the long term?
Well, certainly we're located on the Pacific coast.
Right.
So being on the coast and being proximal to the ports in Los Angeles, is a natural in terms of taking advantage of the Asian markets.
Right.
Our business and our philosophy, however, is heavily weighted towards supporting U.S. industry. So we export and do a lot of exporting, but we export what we have to.
I got you.
We don't export things that we can otherwise sell into the domestic market. I think it's extremely important to protect and to support U.S. domestic producers of metal. And the only way that I can really do that is to practice what I preach. If we can't move the metal into those markets, then we will take advantage of whatever market is available. But given the option, my preference is to serve U.S. industry.
Gotcha. For our audience that just joined us, we've got Doug Kramer with us today. He's the president of Kramer Metals. You can learn more about Doug's company and his family at www.kramermetals.com. This is the ISRI edition of Green is Good, and to learn more about ISRI, please go to ISRI.org. Doug, you're in a family business, as you shared. Your grandfather started it. It's so fascinating as I get to know more and more people of ISRI over the last 10 years, people of our generation, great people like you and your family. It seems like the recycling industry, the scrap industry, is so steeped in family legacy. Can you share a little bit more about your grandfather, where he came from, starting the company, and the evolution of Kramer Metals with our audience?
Sure. My grandfather was an immigrant from Latvia.
Wow.
Came here in the early 1900s. Actually, my grandfather, when he was a young man, was a bootlegger. He was a mobster.
Wow.
And after he had some kids and thought the better of being in that life and not being around for his children, he packed up and he moved west and got into house moving and collection of scrap and things like that, and eventually morphed itself into being a scrap man, a junk man.
And where was his first location?
My grandfather didn't actually have a location.
Okay.
My grandfather actually started the business out of the back seat of the family car, and in those days, my family lived in East Los Angeles.
Okay.
And he rented garages from a lot of the widows that lived in East LA.
Wow.
They didn't drive.
Like the Boyle Heights area?
In the Boyle Heights area is where my family grew up.
Wow.
And they rented garages, and he would keep his brass and his copper and, all of his prepared, ready-to-go goods in their garages, and he'd pay them rent every month. My dad and my uncle actually got our first yard, which was about the size of this booth here, in probably the early to mid-50s, and then slowly and methodically began growing the company through the 60s, 70s, and 80s to where we currently operate our two locations.
And
now.
which cities are they in?
We're in Los Angeles. We are located in Los Angeles.
In Los Angeles.
Yep.
So you're really a homeboy of Los Angeles.
I am
born and bred.
Born and bred.
Wow.
You bet.
And do you ever still go back to Boyle Heights and where your grandpa was and your dad was? And
Actually, very recently, I was with my older son, and we were talking about where Grandpa grew up.
Yeah. And
I said, maybe it was on a Sunday, so we were actually driving home.
Yeah.
And I said, why don't we go up there and let me show you?
Wow.
And I drove him by my grandfather's home, his grandfather's old home, and showed him where they lived, which was, he could not believe that, and drove him around that East LA neighborhood, which is now substantially different than it was when I was a kid.
Right.
And showed him where his where he comes from.
Where he comes from.
Which is a lot different than where he lives.
Right.
Yeah.
And how is it working, you and your brother together? Is that something that's really works well?
It's the greatest. It's who do you trust more than your blood?
Nobody.
So my brother recently joined us. My brother had a company that he sold, and he came to work for us after he sold his business. He had been there for a short time before and then came back to it. Having my brother there allows me to do what I do with ISRI.
Gotcha.
And it's allowing my dad to take some time to be with my mom and his grandchildren, and so it's pretty great.
Speaking of grandchildren, is there talk, or do you feel that the next generation, some members of the next generation, will one day join Kramer Metals?
I guess my feeling about that is really the same as my dad's.
Okay.
I would never push it on them, and I'm not interested in pushing it on them.
Gotcha.
They love to come down. They love to be around it. They are comfortable and familiar, and they're right at home in the scrap yards. I mean, they've
Probably
grown.
Like you.
They've grown up there like I did, for sure. My feeling is that I will work really hard and my brother will work hard to build it for them. And at the point at which they don't want it, there's no ego attached to it.
Right.
We'll do whatever we have to do. But it's their choice.
That's right.
If they love it and they want it, it's theirs.
You said just a couple minutes ago that your brother's involvement allows you more latitude to be involved with ISRI. And we're here at the annual ISRI convention here in Vancouver. The first time it's ever been in Vancouver, British Columbia. You're wearing a beautiful, on your lapel, you're wearing a beautiful button. Our audience probably can't see it, but it says charter member. Can you explain what charter member what membership you have with ISRI and what your leadership position is at ISRI and why ISRI is important to you and Kramer Metals and other great companies like Kramer Metals?
Sure. I am currently the national chairman of ISRI. I am finishing my first year as chairman. I'll have one more year to go. We are charter members of an initiative that we launched under Jerry Sims, which has, fortunately for me, I get to launch what Jerry started,
right.
Which is the Circle of Safety Excellence.
Oh.
And it is a group that has decided that safety is the number one core value of their business, and that their employees, customers, and the public that surround their yards, that their safety is the most important thing every single day, every hour that they operate.
That's great.
And we've agreed to share information about incidences, injuries, occurrences, safe practices, best management techniques, for the purpose of benchmarking ourselves against not only the other ISRI members, but against the entire industry. It is my goal, it is our goal as ISRI to be one of the safest industries in the United States, and we're gonna get there.
And it's all about safety first.
Safety first.
You're halfway through your term, and I know you're busy, and we got to get you out of here in a second or so. Doug, what do you foresee for your second half of your term, and what do you foresee? Give us a little visibility on the next 10 years for ISRI.
Well, the next year of my term there's a lot to do still. There's a lot left to do. I'm extremely fortunate. Mark Lewin, who is next in line, he's the chair-elect now. Fortunately, Mark and I are good friends and have been for a long time. And Mark shares a lot of my vision and a lot of the feelings that I have about a lot of different topics when it comes to ISRI and the direction ISRI should go. And we are working hard to strategically plan and to embark on some real strategic planning going forward for the association. My plan is to get to where I want to be as far as members participating in safety, for ISRI to continue to be the voice of the recycling industry in this country and globally, and to position this trade association and to leave it better than how I found it, really.
That's awesome.
As far as the future for ISRI is concerned, future for ISRI I think is very bright. ISRI is not just a domestic leader. ISRI is really now a global leader in the recycling industry, and with the partnerships and friendships and alliances that we've formed with our neighbors here in Canada, with our international federations and associations, we are definitely a force to be reckoned with, and I want to make sure we stay that way. So,
well, under your leadership, it is going to stay that way.
That's the plan.
And we really appreciate your time today, Doug. You're very inspiring. You're very humble. For our audience out there, this has been this ISRI special edition of Green is Good. We've got Doug Kramer. He's not only the president of Kramer Metals, and to learn more about Kramer Metals, you can go to www.kramermetals.com. He's also the national chairman of ISRI, and this is the special edition of ISRI. Doug, you are definitely leaving this organization better than you found it, and you're making the world a better place. And for that, we say thank you, and you're truly living proof
Thank you.
that green is good.